We are most powerful where we live. The thing that they miss the most and want the most, they want a friend. And the only way for us to figure out how we can help them is to start talking to them. First of all, thank you so much for coming. It's so fun. Can I please just have my own young women raise their hand? Because I'm the secretary in our young women, and these are my award. I'm so happy you came. Thank you.
I love it.
I'm also grateful to see so many friends, and that I just told Amy, I'm just grateful that people care enough about this subject that you would come. I'm going to ask Amy a couple questions because I want you to hear a little bit about the Salvation Army. But before I do that, I want to tell a story that I tell in the book. And I tell it because it's powerful in my own family. So I'm going to introduce you to Agnes and Ebert. Can you see the screens? Can you see them in the back? Agnes and Ebert were my great-grandparents. They came from Norwegian stock, and they were the first generation that was in the United States. And they took advantage of a program, and they homesteaded 1,000 acres in Montana. So they have a 1,000-acre wheat ranch. So this is Ebert, this is Agnes, and their two little boys, Bill and Bob. They were living the American dream. They were just so thrilled. So you can see how proud Ebert is when he had that first son. And they were raising him in Montana. They built a little house. They were working on the ranch. They had a little fruit store in town and just trying to figure out how to make this work. And he was devoted to those boys, loved, loved, loved having them. And just a very hands-on father you can see in the photos. They raised Morgan horses, and they raised wheat, and it was a lot of work. And Ebert picked rocks, as they come up in the field, and it activated his heart murmur, and he died of rheumatic fever. So the kids were 7 and 5. Now Agnes has got this wheat ranch of 1,000 acres and all this work. These are the Norwegian grandparents who came to help, and the boys were just kind of wild and out of control in Chinook, Montana. And so this is Bill going to school in his little knickerbockers. And Agnes couldn't stay. She didn't have what it took to be able to run the farm. So she left the farm fallow, and she moved to California and moved in with her sisters in 1930. So just imagine, the Depression has just happened. October 29, the crash, and there she is living with her sisters. The only money coming into the family was from Bill, who's the oldest boy, his paper route. So he goes and delivers papers every morning, and they pay him a little bit of money. He delivered to a bakery, and they gave him donuts. So every morning he brings donuts back to the family, and they eat that. But Agnes was worried about the kids' nutrition, eating donuts every morning. So she made the rounds in California to the different agencies asking for help, food help, for her family. But as soon as they heard that she owned the land up in Montana, they said, no, sell the land. There's lots of people who don't have anything to sell. Sell the land, and then we can come and help you. But she didn't want to sell the land. It was the boys' inheritance. It was the only thing that their father was going to be able to give them. And so nobody would help her. Bill comes back from his paper route one day, and there is on the porch a box of Carnation canned milk. And for them, it's just a fantastic gift because you don't have to drink it all at once. It's not going to spoil. They can open it and drink it as they like. And there was a little tag on it that said it was from the Salvation Army. So without any preconditions, they had responded to her request and left that on the porch. This is Ebert holding his little son, Bill. This is Bill holding his little daughter, Jean. This is Jean holding her little daughter, Sharon. That's my mom. But that's 4 generations in my family, and that wheat ranch sustained us for 100 years. It paid for our college tuition, and it paid for our weddings, and all the money from that farm kept our family going. So on Christmas, my mother passes out $20 bills to everybody in my family, and she says, go put that in the Salvation Army red kettle that's standing outside of Walmart or the hardware store, or whatever that is. This is a picture of me and my sisters on Christmas Eve with our $20, getting ready to go stuff them in the kettle. I say that because the Salvation Army helped my family when nobody else would, and that's 95 years worth of that feeling. And I share this with you because instead of requiring Agnes to sell the farm and for a short-term gain of canned milk or whatever it was, the Salvation Army had the long-term look to be able to look, what's the long-term solution for this family? And keeping the farm was the long-term solution. Now I'm going to ask Amy in just a couple minutes. The Salvation Army has a program called Pathway of Hope, where they take families who are unhoused, they teach them planning skills, they surround them with a support network, and they walk with them until they can get into affordable housing. And I just love their focus on long-term solutions for some of those things. And I just want to read you this quote. This is from the former commander of the Salvation Army, Commander Ken Hodder. He said, "Whenever someone begins to hope, when they sense that their circumstances can improve, and when they find people in whom they can put their trust, it's like a booster rocket gets lit inside them. It changes everything. And beyond the impact on their own life, it has an enormous influence on their children and their opportunities." I'm the living, breathing testament of that. And I'm so grateful for agencies in this world, people who care about long-term solutions and not just Band-Aids on kinds of things. So I wanted to share that story with you, and I wanted to introduce my friend Amy, because she works at the Salvation Army, and I just want to ask you, this was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Would you tell us a little bit about what the Salvation Army does now?
Yes, we didn't pay for this. We just got this story, and the story is in the book. I have to tell you, I've shared that story with a lot of people at work the last few weeks since I read your book. So the one thing that's sometimes confusing to people about the Salvation Army is that we are different things wherever we are. That there's not just one, we don't have one set of programs that we bring into a community. Whenever we come into community, and we have been in Utah since, I think it's 1887. So I think that people think of it as maybe something more modern, but we've been here a long time in Salvation Army. In fact, I know that I'm also LDS, and in fact, my primary kids didn't come to this. I didn't even think to ask them to come, but I'm a primary president. I didn't think to ask them, but anyway, my father grew up down the street from the Salvation Army in Ogden, and his family had a lot of needs in it, and he actually also received services to the Salvation Army, so it's blessed my family's life too. But whenever we go into a community, what we try to say is, where is the gap? Where is the need here? So we are different things in every community that we're in. We do have a set of general services that we tend to try to provide, but here in Utah, what you're going to see is that we are food pantries for the most part. We provide meals to thousands of people every year. So both through our food pantry, then our hot meals that we provide, we take around meals to families and shut-ins in the area. So that's a big part of what we do. We're about, in Ogden, we're about to open up a low-income housing project for seniors. A lot of people don't know this, but seniors is one of the fastest growing subpopulations of homelessness. That when you're on a fixed income and when inflation gets high, you don't have any way to bring in more income. And so we're seeing a real epidemic of senior homelessness. And so we're really excited to open up 32 rooms of low-income housing up in the Ogden area. But I guess then also we provide a lot of specialized programs. And one of the things that we're most known for is Christmas. And so and one of the best times to be involved in the Salvation Army is at Christmas. Not only are bell ringers, which are wonderful, that's a wonderful way that we raise money, but we provide Christmas to thousands of children in Utah across the state. And one of the ways that we do this is so that we run the Angel Tree program. So if you ever see that, that's the Salvation Army. And what we tried to do, and you talked about this a little bit in the book, not so much with the Salvation Army, but with another program, but is bringing dignity to families even at Christmas time. And so the Angel Tree program is designed so that the joy of Santa is still there, and that parents can be the Santa in their children's lives again. And it's just one of the ways that we really work hard to provide dignity to families in tough circumstances, that even though the gift is given to them, that the gift is believed to, the gift does come from their parents on Christmas morning. So, but one of the real themes of, I hope all of you guys have read the book, or if you haven't, that you're going to soon, but one of the themes of this book really is about the dignity of people. And Sharon shares a lot of stories in it about how we can, even when people are living in undignified circumstances, that we can still treat them with dignity. So I was just wondering if you'd share one of those stories with us.
If you stay here all night, you won't have to read the book.
Yeah, I know. It's really good.
In the book, I put a case study because I think it's helpful to have some kind of practical thing, but this is the story behind that case study. There was a women's shelter in West Virginia, and the stake, the congregation around there, they said, oh, let's do something for them for Christmas. So they organized the way they do. You know, they brought stocking stuffers and presents, and they wrapped those presents, and on Christmas Eve, all the people, including the kids, I went over to that gym, and all the kids were there, and they gave them the presents, and they ripped off the paper, and they were so excited, and they were playing with their toys. And the next year, everyone said, that was just the spirit of Christmas. That felt so good to do a project like that. Let's do it again. And the Stake Relief Society president said, I didn't like that project. And they're like, how can you not like that project? It was a great project. The spirit of Christmas, and we were all involved, and it was giving. And she said, in the back of the gym, I saw their mothers and I saw their faces, and we made them feel like failures because they couldn't provide Christmas for their kids. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, let's go over to the shelter and let's ask them what they want us to do. And let's ask the women that are there this year how we can help them. And so they did. They sent a delegation over, and they sat down with the women, and what they decided to do was to stock a little store. They had a little tent, and they filled it full of cinder blocks and boards, and the people who donated gifts put them in that little tent, and then the mothers could go in and shop and buy and wrap, and there was no emotional kickback to the stake. They never got to see the people open their gifts and, oh, wasn't that great? But it was so much more dignified for the families. And they were allowed to celebrate Christmas privately. And then they said, there's women in the shelter who don't celebrate Christmas, but they celebrate Kwanzaa or Hanukkah. Would you be willing to extend the store, to a longer period of time so that they could also have something for their celebrations? Again, the dignity of recognizing the ways that people celebrate. So I put some of those things in a little case study in the book so that you could go through there and think about the questions and think about what you would do. I encourage you to read it because, in the end, they made a relationship with the technical college, and they've got women getting degrees, and it was a fantastic experiment. But it took one woman saying, I didn't like that project. It wasn't dignified, and then it changed.
We do that here in Salt Lake with Candy King Corner, if you've ever heard of that with the homeless shelters, and including the YWCA, which is the domestic violence homeless shelter in Salt Lake. They do a similar project, and it came about almost the same way, that allowing parents to shop for their children is a really powerful thing. So it's wonderful to see it when people put aside what it is that they, that being able to see it and know that it's the right thing for the people that they're serving. So. I know that you'd asked me to talk about Pathways of Hope, and I feel like you maybe already did a better job than I would.
Not really.
But Pathways of Hope is another one of these programs that is really based around thinking about the dignity of the clients that we serve and giving them choice. And again, I love that this was talked about in your book, that, a lot of times we think we might know better for someone. We think, oh, well, they're in poverty, or they're homeless. They must not know what to do. They must not have the answers for themselves. But in reality, that most people do know what it is that will help them the most. And so the Salvation Army a few years ago started this program called Pathways of Hope, centered around that idea, is that we go to our clients and say, what is the answer for you? And knowing that just like there's many pathways into homelessness and poverty, there's many ways out. Mm-hmm. And so we try to look at both the strengths and challenges that each family has, and then try to surround them in that journey, knowing that each story, each person is going to have a different journey out. And it's just been a powerful program. And I will say that, I've worked in this sector for a long time, and it's showing some of the best long-term results that we've seen in this country in terms of like helping people not just get into housing, but stay into housing. That's something that we don't talk about, but staying in housing is often a difficult thing, but when they get the right resources for a long enough period of time, most people can make that transition. You know, what we do here in Salt Lake is that we have a homelessness prevention fund. It's a lot cheaper to keep somebody out of homelessness than to have them go into a shelter and bring them out. And sometimes that's only a few $100s that's going to make the difference. And so what we try to do is let families come to us, and we've been building a slush fund so that they can say to us, you know, really, I just need my car fixed. And if I could get my car fixed, I could get to work, or I could, you know, and each, you know, we even, when this last year, a father came to us and he said, they'd had a horrible set of circumstances that had brought their family into losing their home, and they'd finally gotten back. But he wanted to be able to, of course, be able to take care of his family himself. It's one of those pieces of of dignity and choice that we try to honor. And he said, you know, I'm in construction, but I put my tools in a shed when we lost our home, or into a storage, and when we lost our home, and they're there, but I can't afford to get to them because I owe back money on this storage shed. It cost us $75 to get him his tools, and he was able to then get to work because he had them, and he knew he had clients, and he knew he had people that he could go to for work. And that $75 is all it took to make a huge difference in his life. And so sometimes the answers are simple, but we might come up with a really complicated solution to what is very simple. And so I'm extraordinarily proud of the ways that I see the Salvation Army do this, but I also say I'm a big fan of so many agencies in town. You know, I watch the Road Home do this all the time. I watch the American Red Cross does such great work. I mean, there's just so many agencies that are doing great work. So never be fooled by the fact that there's one place to give or one organization that is doing everything. There's lots of great organizations, lots of great places to support who are all trying to do this great, wonderful work of dignity. But it also reminds me of, in your book, that you talk about where our power most is serving where we live. And that's always been something that I believed, and so I'd love for you to share some of that.
I used this quote right here where it says, you know, you're doing small things with great love, everyday humanitarians. And it's built around this idea that we are most powerful where we live. And I know when I say that, everybody in the audience is like, that's not really true. I'm more, you know, Ukraine needs me more than Utah needs me. And because we see those things in the news. But I just want to take a minute. I'm going to tell you a story about how I learned this truth, and then you tell me if it resonates with you. I was sent by the church, humanitarian, after the Southeast Asia tsunami to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was devastated by this terrible tidal wave that came. 300,000 people died and just ground up the infrastructure. The island was just in terrible shape. And 5 months later, I was there helping fishermen get their boats and seamstresses get their sewing machines. And on our way across the country, the man who was driving me, he said, I want to show you something. So we stopped at a place, and he said, there's a railroad track here. It goes across the country. And the train stopped when we heard the sirens. And the track was built up really high, and the train was a big, heavy metal train. And people thought that will be a safe place. So they lifted up toddlers and babies up into the windows. You know, people accepted them into the train. But when the wave hit the train, it hit with such force, it just tumbled the whole thing. And 1,500 people in the train died, all those children. Now, 5 months later, their families are all camped around the train. And I said, why are they here? And he said, because it was the last time they were together as a family. So, you know, they do what they do. They come up and they say, I lost my baby, I lost my husband, can you help me, please help me? Just the few English words that they know. And I'm paralyzed. I don't have anything in my pockets. I can't explain to them that, you know, we're building houses that are over that ridge, because they don't care about that. And Shanta, who's the man who's driving me, he goes over to our van and he gets a soccer ball and he pumps it up And he starts, kicking it around, and he's showing off his little tricks, and the kids are doing their tricks, and kids come out of everywhere to, start kicking that around with him. And while he's doing that, he says to the woman, "How did that yeast go that I gave you?" And she goes running into her place and brings him some bread. "Try my bread, it's working great." And there's another woman who said, "I can't find any washing powder. Can you help us get some?" He said, "I know where to get some. I'll bring you some next time." He's doing all this stuff as we're driving around, and as I'm standing there, not able to express myself in any way, I realize Shanta is more powerful in this situation than I am. It doesn't matter that he doesn't work for a big NGO. It doesn't matter that he has access to a big humanitarian fund. He speaks the language, he understands the culture, and he's there every single day. Those things are what make us powerful. You might go to another country and get involved, and I've been in Bolivia making solar showers. That's a different thing. That's a cultural exchange where you're learning about people, and you're learning about them, they're learning about you. But you're not going to change systemic poverty on a trip like that. The way you're going to do that is right where you live, helping people that are unhoused, finding people who are sick, or working with somebody who's in grief, who just lost their husband. All those little things. I see pictures all the time because of my job where it's just completely devastated. It's a picture of Gaza or Ukraine where the bombs have just dropped off and it's just rubble. And you think, oh my gosh, what can I do? And it took me a long time to realize there are people in this room, there are people in the store, a bomb has gone off inside them, and they look like that inside, and they don't show it on the outside. And the only way for us to figure out how we can help them is to start talking to them. Sit down and be with them and ask them questions. And as Amy said, you don't know the solution to their problem. You don't know what they need, but you can ask them questions and see if something in the conversation, something will come out. Have you found that to be true, that people are powerful where you live, or am I just up in the night?
No, absolutely not. It's funny. I sometimes will get the question like, should I give here, or should I give locally, or should I give? And I hate the question, to be honest, because I think there's lots of good organizations throughout the world. But in terms of the real impact that you can have in someone's life, because I will say that there's nothing like money. I will not, money helps, and that's very helpful. But what we need more and more are people to become engaged in this. If you don't think that there's poverty and starvation in Salt Lake, then you probably just haven't looked close enough or looked into it. There's a lot right here in our valley, and there's plenty of help that's needed here. And because when you're here, you also can be part of that solution in terms of giving time. We do need those financial gifts, but we also need the time just as much from people. And so I do the same thing to people as I say, I never like to tell them I never like to tell people where to donate, because that feels awkward to me. But I can always tell them that they're never going to regret if they become involved and give up their time as well as their money. We need that so desperately. That is a resource that is becoming harder and harder to get, but it's something that we all, if we kind of can put that priority on it. And I will say volunteers make a huge difference for all nonprofit agencies in town. Right now, we always are needing volunteers at our food pantries. We do special projects around the year, and we need help with that. Christmas is a great time. If you want a really special time to become involved, is help out with the Christmas. You won't see family. You might actually see parents receive gifts and pick them up. But it's a very special time to be part of keeping the magic of Christmas for everyone. And, we sometimes will get people who will say, should we be doing Christmas? Aren't there greater needs? But what we always say is that, to a child who's 5, 6, 7, 8, there maybe not be anything more important than waking up to a gift on Christmas morning. That keeping that magic alive and making them feel, that some normalcy in that and having something special is important. there's too many wonderful things to support. And so trying to decide what is most important, you're just never going to be able to do it. And so I just don't get into the ranking process. But I do know that a gift on Christmas morning makes a big difference in the lives of a lot of children, and gives them the hope that we've talked so much about today. But, there's lots of ways to, get involved at the Salvation Army, but we're just one organization. So what would you say to people just in terms of if they want to volunteer their time?
Well, you're asking the person who runs
Yeah.
Just Serve for a living.
Yeah.
So
I knew that.
about 3 years ago, and including the funding that the church gives, and we all give a little bit of money. The funding that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints gives to humanitarian services is made up of $20 donations, $15 donations. It's you and your nephew and your grandma, and we recognize all of that. Well, the great thing about that is we can combine our efforts and do something at scale. I can't do a lot with my $20, but if I combine it with all of your $20, then we can do something really big. And as Amy says, the money makes a difference. But money only works if it gets pushed or percolated through a trusted network. In other words, you can spend a lot of money and it will just disappear into the cracks. It doesn't go to the right people. The only way you can have the impact you want is to have a trusted network of people who are not corrupt, they're holding each other accountable, they're passionate about what the impact is, and the money goes through that. So you're going to say, well, what's a trusted network? It's your PTSA, it's your book group, it's the people you run with, it's your colleagues at work, it's in the church we call it a council. It's any group of people who care about an issue and are going to do something about it. And they know what to do with the money. They know your name and they know where you live and they know who needs what. And trusted networks are like that. And volunteers became a critical part. We have cash, we have commodities out of the storehouses, and we have volunteer labor. And of the three of those things, the volunteerism is the most important thing. And that's why we paid for the platform to be able to come up and use Just Serve. Anybody can use it. We want anybody to use it. The agencies in town use it to get volunteers. But
the agencies love this.
And it's now in 17 countries. Yeah. We're just opening up in the Philippines beginning of next year. But it's the ability to be able to say, I don't know what to do. Let me put in my zip code. Up come 75 projects. And there's the angel tree over the Salvation Army. I'll go do that. And so you can certainly fulfill a project on Just Serve. You can also post a project. I would love our young women to be able to say, let's figure out a project we want to do. We'll post it on there, and then we'll invite other people to join us. So I think we should, don't you? Yeah. Our bishop is here and he's saying, yes, do that.
All the primary children are asked to do a project this year too, so you could get them involved as well. So,
I wonder if you could just say, what are the qualities that you look for in a volunteer?
I will say this, is that, we do get a lot of one-time volunteers, and that is helpful. We get, a lot of youth groups that come in at Christmas time and help us sort toys. And that is very valuable. When we don't have to pay someone to do that work, that is so valuable, and it makes those dollars that people give to us go a lot further. And then it also, it gives people a different experience with us. But, we're looking actually for longevity. What we're really looking for are people who will, not so much that they give us 20 hours a week. We know that's just not realistic. But someone who can give 2 to 3 hours every week for a long period of time is one of the most valuable things to most agencies, that they get trained, that they, right now, because of liability issues that we have to go through, we have to vet all of our volunteers usually, especially if they're working with children. And so if we're going to pay to have somebody have a background check on, what we really love is if you'll show up with consistency. And those kids, that makes a difference too. I was just thinking about this, is that when this is going to date me, but back in 1988, when I first started college, the new homeless shelter downtown Salt Lake was opening up. It used to be called, what was it before the road home? anyway, I can't think of what it was called. But anyway, they opened up their new homeless shelter for the first time. It was the first time a large homeless shelter had been opened in Salt Lake. And I remember going through, and they were talking about the fact that most all of us were probably at least 10 to 20 steps away from homelessness, right? That if we were to lose our housing, that we have family, we have friends, we have a lot of steps that we could go to before we would have to move into a shelter. But for a lot of families, they don't have that support network. And so when something happens to them, there's no support there for them. And so they immediately, or maybe they're 1 or 2 steps away, and pretty soon they're in a shelter. A lot of times they're just not that different from us. I think there's a sense that maybe that they're different. They're not. Their stories are the same. Their joys and heartaches are the same. It's just circumstances that often bring them to this place, and it's important to remember that they are like you. So that's when I also think about trusted networks, is that one of the things that we try to do in Pathways of Hope is surround people. We give them a network, right? That we try to build that around, and we use it with volunteers. I mean, if you can volunteer to help a refugee family, a family that's new to a neighborhood, a family that is just new into maybe housing after living in a shelter, being a trusted network for them is probably one of the most valuable things you could do, and probably also one of the most rewarding things that you can do in your life. So
I'll just end this because we want to have enough time for you to ask questions. But I want to just reiterate what Amy said. When we help people settle in Salt Lake City, they need rides to the doctor, they need English class, they need help reading their mail, different things like that. And you can volunteer to do that. But do you know what they ask for the very most? The thing that they miss the most and want the most? They want a friend. They want somebody to invite over to dinner, somebody to say, my mom has breast cancer, somebody to say, I don't understand why you do this in the United States. They just need a friend in their trusted network. That is the greatest poverty, when you don't have anybody in your trusted network. And all of us can do that. My friend John Huco, who's the CEO of Rotary International, he said in Australia a couple years ago, we need to wage peace as aggressively as nations wage war. So I think, okay, what are my instruments of peace? How do I wage peace? And this is for every one of us. It means that our neighbor, who is completely politically different from us, we still need to have a good relationship with them. We can't go nuclear, and we can't burn that bridge. We need to be kind with people who are very different from us, who worship differently, who vote differently, who look differently. Those are the people that we need to have an outreach to be the friends, build that trusted network. And if every person walked out of here tonight, read the book, don't read the book, I don't care. If we were committed to that.
Read the book.
If we were committed to that, our neighborhoods would change.
Yeah.
And we need that more than anything else right now. So I just want to thank you for having the interest of coming. Wasn't it marvelous to listen to Amy? It was so fun to hear her as a professional. Thank you. And then we're happy to take questions. What questions do you have?
I am about halfway through the book.
She looked.
Yeah.
My question is, do you feel like this is more of an entry-level aid type book? I'd be curious how these principles evolve as efforts, capacity, and organizations grow.
Could everybody hear that question? So it's a very good question. Is this an entry-level book? In some ways, I wanted to write it for anybody who could use it. And I want it to be at a level where there's no jargon, there's no, all kinds of academic terms. I want anybody to be to engage with it. But at a different level, it is the most powerful kind of humanitarian work. Because as you're working with governments and systems, all of that work has to trickle down to the absolute family right where they live. Turns out we are at the absolute family level right where we live. So in some ways, it's very basic. And in other ways, it's the most comprehensive of things to be able to do. Maybe I'm patting myself on the back, but that's what I was trying to do.
I will say that, I'm professionally a social worker, and so I've done this work for a long time, but I was saying to Sharon today that there's just a lot in there that was a good reminder to me of some of those basics of getting back to. It's easy to get caught up into the day-to-day of what you do. our work is not so different from what you do. It's very easy to get caught up in just the stuff that has to be done. And so it was a wonderful reminder. And I'm going to tease something. I think one of the most important things one of the most interesting stories she tells, and we have this at the Salvation Army a lot, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's so interesting, and a lot of people don't think about it, is the second disaster.
Yeah.
And I want you to read about it because it's so true, and it's something that recently we've been doing some work on at the Salvation Army and trying to deal with that. And so I was glad to see you address that in your book. So
You asked where the principles came from, and I'll just tell you, these are 12 mistakes that I've made. So I was just trying to help people not have to make those same mistakes. There's a question right there. Can we get rid of
yes,
that?
sorry. Yes, of course. Yeah.
When you talk about the second disaster, that was a question when I was reading it. Because so often people start gathering,
Yeah.
and you don't want to offend, nor do you really know what their project is. Is there a gentle way to say maybe not a good idea?
Thank you for asking this question.
Yeah.
If I won't spoil this part of the book for you, but the second disaster is the stuff that people collect and send to a disaster site when it wasn't asked for. And it's done out of empathy, but it so often is the wrong thing given at the wrong time. And people always think that the premier tool of humanitarian work is money, and the premier thing is to get stuff on site. And those are both wrong. The premier tool is the trusted network, and the premier skill is to ask people what they want. And so your solution to my problem will always be wrong. But I know what I need, and if you take enough time to ask me, sit down and find out what it is I really need, then we'll know what to do. But if we just willy-nilly assume and gather a bunch of stuff and send it there, it will be a pain, and it will be wrong, and it will end up being destroyed because it was the wrong thing at the wrong time.
What happens is that we, in agencies, like the Salvation Army, we know it comes from such a good place in their heart. And that's what's hard about it, is that we know that teddy bear or that, like bag of clothes comes from such a good place, and we're so appreciative of it. But it still doesn't, it still is a problem for us to deal with. She tells the story about having to get rid of a lot of clothing, and I'd heard that story actually before. It's a really sad story of a lot of resources that went to waste because it was the wrong thing. So I think in some ways, I've struggled with this so many times of people bringing things I think of a gentleman whose wife had passed away, and he brought all of her clothing items to the YWCA, to the domestic violence shelter. Well, she was probably in her 90s, and the average age of a woman at the YWCA is probably in her 20s to 30s. So it was house coats and things like this. It came from the best place in his heart, and in that situation, we took it that day and we passed it over. But it gets to be hard, and because he did it from the best place, but one of the best things you can do is share that information with others, is to say, hey, I know your impulse right now is to send a teddy bear, but is the teddy bear needed? Like, we could use everybody's help. Yeah, exactly.
I'll share an example from my own experience. And when that tsunami happened in 2004, we assumed from all of our great experience in disasters, they'll need water, first of all. So we were already gathering the water. When we met with the government official and we asked our question, what do you need? Waiting back for hear him say water. He said, we need body bags. We can't do anything until we, in a dignified way, help remove the remains of all the people who have died. We would have never thought about that. But it was the thing they needed first, and we found out because we asked. Other questions?
I'm sorry, but I haven't read the book yet.
No worries.
But I bought it. And I'm excited to read it and grateful for all the instruction that we've received tonight. One of the things we've experienced is that in connection with so often with these temporal needs that are mental health issues.
Yeah.
How do you address that? And what's the correlation? What have you learned? What have you found that makes a difference that way too?
Well, this gets to be a difficult issue because it's sometimes it's which one causes the other. we know that in homelessness, there's about 1/3 of the population is mentally ill. We also know that about 1/3 has addiction issues. But I'm not saying that those are separate 1/3s. A lot of times there's crossover between the two. This gets to be difficult because I will have to say that I do have sort of a take on this, and that first of all, we cannot address the issue of our growing unhoused population without addressing mental health issues. And it is one of the most complicated issues to address, right? And part of it is that sometimes people don't want to address it. And that's one of the things that you have to come to a peace at when you work in this field, is that you have to that's part of the dignity you give them, that they may not want to get the help that you know is available to them. One of the difficult things that is hard for a lot of people to understand is that we do want to work towards people becoming self-sufficient, but there's a large portion of our population who will just never be able to live unassisted. And for many of us, like we have an adult son who has compulsive issues, and he's getting through life and he's getting better, and but we're his support, we're his trusted network, and we're surrounding him to help him. But if he were in a family that didn't have that kind of support, he may have been kicked out by now and said, "You're on your own." I believe, in our situation, we think that David will be fine and will be one to be able to live on his own. But there's a lot of people like him, and then especially if you get into and start living in shelters, that it just becomes exasperated. So one of the things that we have to think about is that there has to be lots of different solutions to our housing problem, that there's just not just one answer. And so the communities that are doing best at this are having lots of different types of solutions. They have SROs, which is single room occupancy for people who just, can't, just need to be in one small space and that's all they need. We need to have permanent supportive housing for people who can mostly function on their own, but they need that support around them. They need somebody to sort of keep an eye on them. And then obviously we just need, more housing. One of the things that, talking about like a solution that came from asking the right question is, we try to work on prevention issues, right? We try to keep people from out of the shelter. And one time we were talking to somebody and saying, what would help you? Is there anything that we could do for you now so that you do not have to enter the shelter system, because we knew that that's a longer road out? And he said, I struggle to live on my own because I get anxious and I have a real anxiety problem. And he said, I also I can't work full-time to make the salary to live. I mean, we all know Salt Lake is a really tough place to live. Even with a college education, it's hard to afford housing here. And he said, if you could help me find a couple of roommates. We've helped him find a couple of roommates and solved homelessness for 3 people right there. That's the kind of thing that this kind of creative is, that some people just they're not going to do well if they're isolated and on their own. And so we need to find all the different types of housing solutions for them. It gets to be more complicated, and I could go on and on about this, which I won't tonight. But if you want to talk about it more, I'd love to. So
I want to give my young women the last word. Do you have a question you want to ask? All right, I'll pass this down.
Okay. What would you say was the hardest part for you, or is the hardest part about starting humanitarian?
Could you hear her question? What's the hardest part about just getting started? It's so funny, but our minds go into different channels, and we always think kits and we always think quilts. And there's a much bigger arena for that. And so the hardest thing for me is I don't know what to do. And so in the back of the book, I did 50 different ideas. And you may say, I don't want to do any of those 50, but at least they'll spark you and you'll say, I'll do 51. So the hardest thing for me is to just think of something new or sit down with people and ask them. If I want to get started, if I'm in a new location and I don't know what to do, I'm paralyzed the way I sometimes get. One of the best pieces of advice I have is Go sit down with the principal of your junior high. Everyone goes to the elementary school, but go to the junior high and say, look, I live here. I care about kids. I see them walking back and forth to school. What's going on? What do you need from somebody in the neighborhood? What could we do that would help you? You'll have a fantastic conversation and you'll walk out of there with something that you know you can do. So that's my opportunity. Now you guys are mostly in high school, not all, but it would be fantastic if you sat down next to your principal or your vice principal or your PE teacher or somebody just said, what's going on that we don't know about? What could we do as students? I was in Las Vegas on Saturday and I went to, Friday I guess, I went to a Just Serve Club at a high school. It was 120 kids. And there wasn't I mean, the adults were in the room, but there was a junior named Lauren who was up there conducting the whole thing. We've done these 3 things. We're going to do these other 4 things. I was amazed at the leadership that was coming out of 16 and 17-year-olds. So there's your challenge.
Yeah, that's great.
One
That's
last question.
What can old people do where you can't stand anymore, you can't walk anymore? So that's why you say,
Let me open this up to the group. Mrs. Stoof has said, what can old people do who aren't mobile? What are your suggestions? What can they do?
Talk to the youth. Let them know your experiences.
Yes.
Show them ways that they can help. We need the elderly to teach the youth.
Let me hear 2 more things.
So we had a sweet sister in a ward down in California. She was, how old was she? Like 95. So she had the same situation. She couldn't physically do a lot of things and stand and do things, but she used to gather people at her home and play cards and just be with people and do something she loved with them. And what it did is create a conversation and connection. So that was incredible to learn from her.
Love that. 1 more. Somebody give 1 more. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Yeah.
I would reach out to the youth to someone create a very simple flyer for you and put your contact, and on a bulletin board wherever you feel safe, say, hey, I want to share something with you about service, or just put whatever you want to do and ask for that support of the youth.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's something there for
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for being here today. Amy and I will come up to the front of the store. We're happy to answer questions, sign books, talk, take pictures, whatever you want to do. Thank you to you for caring enough to come tonight.
Thank you.